California's unique geology has provided the state with the richest gold and mercury deposits found anywhere in the world. The gold dots on the map show all the major gold mines in the Sierra Nevada and Klamath regions of California. The red dots in the Coast Range area also show the location of all major mercury mines. Approximately 50 million pounds of mercury were produced from the mercury mines, of which 30 million pounds were transported and used to recover gold in the gold mines of the Sierra Nevada region. It's estimated that 10 to 30% of the mercury used in the placer and hard rock gold mines was lost to the environment. The millions of pounds of lost mercury has formed hot spots or areas of high concentration in proximity to the gold mines and in nearly all Sierran rivers flowing into the Sacramento and San Joaquin Bay Delta region, contaminating the sediments, water, and biota over large areas of these watersheds. The northern Sierra Nevada region has preserved deep, gold-bearing gravel deposits of the 50-million-year-old ancestral Yuba River system. These vast gravel deposits were exploited using hydraulic mining methods over a 30-year period beginning in the late 1850s. These industrial-scale mining operations yielded roughly 20 million ounces of gold, but required mine processing of nearly 2 billion cubic yards of sediment that was dumped directly into the Sierran watersheds. The environmental impacts of widespread sediment discharge and mercury contamination are so significant in scope that only in the last 5 years have environmental cleanup projects been initiated to assess and then mitigate their effects. The Boston Project was a successful pilot project that was the first of its kind to recover elemental mercury, which was lost during hydraulic gold mining operations. The lost mercury was concentrated in sediments on the floor of the Boston Mine sluice box tunnel. This mine site was ideally suited for a pilot project of this nature since the tunnel was only 200 feet in length and contained a low water discharge of 5 to 10 gallons per minute. We've done a pilot, and even if we cleaned up many of these mines at the uppermost part of the sub-watersheds, for every ounce of mercury that we potentially recovered from a site and got out of the environment, there will be 10 ounces or more that exist in the creek. The cleanup costs of dealing with what is in the creeks, for instance, here on Greenhorn Creek alone, we're probably talking say 100 million to 150 million yards went down this creek. This is a forest that existed in the 1860s that has been only in the last 30, 50 years has been starting to be exposed. So you're looking at a forest that came down that far. And the tailings are up to 100 feet in depth. And of course this dumps into Rawlins Reservoir. The cleanup costs for instance, given this as a non-point source, but cleaning up this is more money than there is in the National Treasury. So we have to put our federal dollars, act prudently and put them where we think we can do the most good. And certainly if you clean up an area like this, there's enough other sources like bank storage farther upstream. If any of you have ever walked up into Upper Greenhorn Creek, there's gravel terraces up 150 feet above the creek. Certain number of key features. High walls, ground sluices usually are vegetated at this point. Pit lakes are usually formed by the blocking of the sluice tunnels, associated wetlands. These tunnels have been commonly known as drain tunnels, but they were not put in primarily for that purpose. The purpose was primarily for recovery of gold. The numbers kind of pencil out at it's 10 pounds per linear foot of sluice box per season, or 2 tons of mercury per 100 feet of sluice box per season. If you do the math, you can figure out how much mercury was required, absolutely required, for recovery, proper recovery of placer gold within these tunnels. Excavation of the tunnel sediments was no easy task. The tunnel outlet was 25 feet up in the air. A staging platform had to be built. Some mucking equipment or slusher was set up to remove that material. It was then conveyed to a processing area. The physical separation occurred. We had on-site disposal of the alluvial material, which was below background in Mercury, and this was done during the dry season. The water that was coming out of the tunnel was put into a pipe, and that water was used for watering the roads. The slusher equipment was set up here at the mouth of the tunnel, which is basically a long shovel on a cable. Think of it like a rope tow, but with a shovel on it. It goes all the way back into the tunnel, drops down, and then scoops and brings that material to the front. There's a slot here in this platform, and the muck drops down in here. As you see, it's so viscous that it really doesn't run off anywhere. So there was about between 5 and 10 yards a day were being processed and then hauled up to an existing plant site area for processing. And this shows an example of the plant that was used here, consisting of a trommel or a cylindrical drum which rotates, which has sprayer bars. It has a series of screens here to classify the material. The oversize comes out this end of it. The undersized material, where essentially all the mercury is, and other heavy mineral grains go into a Clark bowl. It's a centrifugal device, and the revolutions per minute is carefully controlled. This is a 36-inch diameter Clark bowl, and when it's, you'll say process through between 5 and 10 yards, the plant shut down. At that point, you can actually see the mercury that has been recovered. And to the extent that when you pan the tailings, this equipment is so efficient that they're essentially the waste discharge is below regulatory limits for water and sediment.
Yeah, that's there. See right there, crack? Yeah, see right down there.
At the end of each day, you can actually see the mercury globules that have been collected. On the floor of the tunnel, once all the sediments were removed, you could actually see puddles of mercury on bedrock. This is bedrock, and then these are the different holes. These are the different potholes that existed through the action of abrasive action of use of the tunnel during hydraulic mining period. We realized early on that the Boston site, you could actually visibly see elemental mercury in the plunge pools below the sluice tunnel. You could pan it out of the sluice tunnel. Usually when you're actually panning it out, if you can see the mercury, you know, just kind of ballpark, you're looking at an average of 100 ppm mercury or higher. The water was high. All of the biota, essentially from the water skeeters or the gerrids through banana slugs, frogs, was high, and it's pretty typical to see. Immediately around the environs of the sluice tunnel outlets usually get elevated bioaccumulation. A separation of heavy mineral grains, spiral pan. This one is a particularly large one and was amenable to cleaning up, rapid cleaning up of the concentrates, which otherwise would take days. Be very labor intensive if you didn't have a device like this. And basically what happens, the heavier the mineral grains will ride up on each successive revolution and then drop through this into a collecting cup on a pan on the other side, while the lighter material will simply slough off. The material that actually went through the spiral pan, that material was encased in concrete, so to immobilize it. Back in action.
We're not going to use this stuff. Once you pull it from one end, I don't believe we got one.
The tunnel was cemented, and the reason for doing that was, again, when you removed essentially nearly all the mercury, if you cement the floor of the tunnel, it removes that anaerobic environment where the iron and sulfate reducing bacteria would normally be located, preventing further conversion of methyl mercury as well as concentration or entrapment of elemental mercury should it be present in the tunnel. During the process of pouring this, sealing it with cement, and then we put actually a curb on here. The problem is, in this type of bedrock, slates, they tend to generate a fairly high iron. There are bats living in the tunnel, and the feds are required to protect bat habitat as well as bat colonies. So this is a conventional bat gate that we use throughout the state. These things are pricey. It also is a good way of, it basically excludes people, but the bats can fly through these slats without really stopping. This project cost, the cleanup itself was 350 grand. The total cost, if you add in CERCLA type environmental documentation and staff time, is probably 550 grand. The processing part of it was around, the physical removal of the mercury was about 50,000 or 10% of the cost. We removed 2.5 pounds of mercury from this tunnel. It doesn't seem, if you want to play the devil's advocate and you say, well, okay, so it basically costs you $175,000 a pound to remove this mercury. Well, we can look at it the other way, if the glass is half full, and say, well, look at how little amount of mercury it takes to create a significant environmental problem. And when you do the math, it kind of works out to, at these flow rates, somewhere between 250 million and 1 billion gallons of water a year were being contaminated coming out of this tunnel. So we have removed that point source of discharge. The levels coming out of the tunnel now are below regulatory limits. The basis for actually conducting the cleanup was that we have documented not only biota, but that humans, that people are being exposed to mercury at elevated concentrations. Most of these sluice tunnels on any given weekend, there's usually people mining in the tunnel, recreational mining in there. The problem with that is, with the flows coming out of these tunnels, when you do that, you create a point source of discharge that's usually 20 times what the elevated number already is.